I stepped off the dusty bus with my old backpack hanging from one shoulder and my boots still thick with red mud from the village trails. 8 months. That was how long I had been away, working as a community nurse in a small, flood-hit village deep in rural Alaska, where the nearest proper hospital was a 4-hour drive on unpaved roads. I had poured everything into that work, late nights, borrowed supplies, and a kind of quiet, aching purpose I hadn't felt in years. Now, finally, I was home. The front door of my own house was unlocked. I pushed it open with one hand and followed the sound of laughter down the hallway toward the kitchen. The light was warm and yellow. Glasses clinked. Someone was telling a story about a vacation. I almost smiled. Then I stepped into the doorway and stopped breathing. My sister Donna, my mother-in-law Agnes, and my daughter-in-law Willa were sitting around my kitchen table. Between them, spread out like a hand of playing cards, were stacks of crisp $100 bills. More money than I had ever seen in one place in my life. Donna had a glass of red wine raised to her lips. She was laughing, easy and loose, the way you laugh when you are completely certain you are safe. "Naomi's gone for good this time," she was saying. "That insurance check finally cleared, and nobody is going to take it from us now." Then she turned her head and saw me. The laughter stopped like someone had cut a wire. The wine glass tilted dangerously in Donna's hand. Agnes grabbed the edge of the table. Willa lurched backward and knocked a stack of bills onto the floor. For a long, frozen moment, nobody moved at all. Donna's face drained of every drop of color. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Finally, barely above a whisper, she said, "You're supposed to be dead." I stood in my own kitchen doorway, backpack still on my shoulder, mud still on my boots, staring at the woman I had grown up alongside. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. I wanted to speak. I wanted to ask what all that money was, what she meant, what any of this was. But the words had turned to stone somewhere in my throat. I just stood there, looking at the ruins of everything I had trusted. My name is Naomi. I am 56 years old, and until 8 months ago, I had spent my entire adult life holding my family together with both hands. I raised 2 children, buried both my parents, and worked 30 years as a registered nurse before my hospital department was cut and I was offered a part-time role that barely covered gas. When the Alaska Relief Program put out a call for experienced nurses to help flood-damaged communities, I signed up without much debate. The village of Calton Creek had lost its only clinic worker in the disaster. They needed someone with real skills. I had real skills, and my children were grown. My husband Walter understood, or said he did. My sister Donna had cried on the phone the day I left. She swore she would check on Walter every week, water my plants, and keep an eye on things. "You're so brave," she told me, her voice cracking. I believed her because I had always believed her, even though she had borrowed money from me a dozen times and repaid it exactly never. That was how we worked. Donna was the bright, easy one. I was the one holding things up from underneath. The village needed everything. I worked 18-hour days in a converted school building, treating infections and broken bones, walking through mud to reach elderly residents who couldn't come to us. I called home when the satellite phone allowed. I texted Donna updates from my cell when there was enough signal. I sent Walter postcards. I was not hiding. I was not unreachable. I was simply doing the work. Standing in my kitchen now, looking at the money spread across my own table, I understood something terrible. Donna had not cried at the bus stop because she was going to miss me. She had cried because she was already calculating. The life insurance policy I had taken out years ago to protect my family had at some point become her plan. Not an emergency plan, not a desperate last resort, a plan she had prepared for calmly and in advance. The only part she had not prepared for was me walking through the front door. I had $21 and a nearly dead phone when I drove myself to the cheapest motel I could find on the edge of town. The room smelled like old carpet and pine cleaner, and the bed made a sound when I sat on it that was either springs or sadness. I stared at the wall for a few minutes. Then I called the insurance company. The woman who answered was polite and careful. She asked me to confirm my full name, my policy number, and my date of birth. Then she went quiet for a long moment. When she came back, Her voice had changed in the careful, managed way. Voices change when the person speaking them is trying to stay professional in an unusual situation. "Miss Naomi," she said, "according to our records, a certified death claim was filed on your policy 7 months ago. A notarized affidavit was submitted stating that you were lost during severe Alaskan flooding and that no remains were recovered. The full benefit was paid out 6 months ago." I asked her how much. She told me. My hands went cold. It was every penny of the policy I had paid into for over 20 years, money meant to care for Walter if I died, not to fund Donna's lifestyle while I was alive and working in a clinic 4,000 miles away. I asked who had filed the claim. "A Miss Donna," the woman said, "listed as next of kin." I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in that motel room and stared at the water stain on the ceiling for a very long time. I thought about every Christmas dinner I had cooked while Donna arrived late and left before the dishes. I thought about every loan I had given her that somehow became a gift without my agreement. I thought about her hugging me at the bus stop and telling me to stay safe. Then my phone rang. It was Donna. "Come back tomorrow and sign whatever papers we need," she said, voice smooth and sweet. "And this all goes away quietly. We're family. Nobody needs to know." I didn't answer. "Or," she added, her tone shifting just slightly, "we tell people you've been acting unstable for years. You left your husband to go live in Alaska. Nobody will question it." I hung up. Sleep did not come that night. I found Mr. Pina Harlan through a referral from a retired nurse I had once worked with at the county hospital years before. His office was small, 2 rooms above a dry cleaning shop, a rubber plant in one corner, a coffee maker that ran all day and filled the place with a smell like the inside of a warm mug. He looked like someone's quiet grandfather, but the way he listened told me he didn't miss a single word of anything you said to him. I told him everything. I did not rush and I did not break down. I had spent the whole night organizing it in my head, and I laid it out like a patient chart, dates, names, amounts, conversations. When I finished, he folded his hands on the desk and looked at me steadily. "You're alive," he said. "That changes everything." He asked me if I had any proof of regular contact with my family during the 8 months I was in Alaska. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. The last text I had sent Donna was 2 days before the worst storm had hit. A long, detailed message telling her exactly where I was, which building the clinic operated from, and that I planned to be home within 6 weeks. Mr. Harlan read it twice. His eyebrows rose slowly and stayed there. "She had your location," he said. "She knew you were alive when she filed that affidavit." "Yes," I said. "That's fraud," he said. "Deliberate, documented insurance fraud." I had known this on some level since the moment I stepped into my own kitchen. But hearing a lawyer say it plainly, without softening it, without making gentle excuses for my family the way people always had, cracked something loose inside my chest. It wasn't grief exactly. It was more like the first real breath after being held underwater for a very long time. I left his office with my spine a little straighter than it had been when I arrived. When I got back to the motel parking lot, Walter was sitting in his truck, hands in his lap, staring at the ground. "They made me sign some papers," he said. He still couldn't look at me. "Agnes told me it was for the family." I started keeping a notebook that same evening. Every conversation I could remember, every date I could verify, every name and detail. I wrote it all down in a plain spiral pad I bought at the gas station across the street from the motel. It wasn't evidence by itself, but Mr. Harlan had told me that in cases like this, small details stack into something that can hold real weight. Willa came to the motel the next afternoon. She knocked softly and held out a cardboard box of my old clothes, a few sweaters, my good rain jacket, some shoes. She wore a careful smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom, just let this go," she said. "The money's spent. We honestly all thought you weren't coming back." I looked at her for a moment. Then I asked her directly whether she had helped Donna find the notary who had stamped the death affidavit. Her eyes moved. Not fast, but I saw it, a small flicker to the left, the way people look when they are searching for a version of the truth that won't hurt them too badly. She didn't answer. She just set the box down, said she hoped I'd take care of myself, and left. I sat with the box for a while. Then I went through it slowly, folding things, checking pockets out of old habit. In the lining of my winter coat, I found a Christmas card. Donna's handwriting on the envelope. I turned it over and checked the postmark. 3 months ago. Right in the middle of the period, I was officially supposed to be dead. Inside, in Donna's looping cursive handwriting, she had written, "Hope the village work is keeping you busy. Thinking of you, Naomi. Stay warm out there." She had written a holiday card to a woman she had declared legally dead because she knew perfectly well that woman was alive and working in a clinic in Alaska. I photographed it from both sides and emailed the images to Mr. Harlan that night. His reply came back in under 12 minutes. "This is very good," was all it said. Mr. Harlan filed the first set of legal papers 3 days later. He moved to formally reverse the fraudulent death declaration and to notify the insurance company that the beneficiary had received a payout under false pretenses. It was the beginning of putting the machine in motion, and even though nothing was resolved yet, the act of filing felt solid, like planting a flag in ground that was finally mine again. Donna called me within an hour of being served. She didn't yell right away. She started low and controlled, trying to reason with me. "You are burning this family to the ground," she said. "Do you understand that? You are destroying everything we built together." I thought about the word together. I thought about everything I had built while she stood nearby and enjoyed it. I let her keep talking. Then the yelling started. She called me selfish, unstable, vengeful. She said I had abandoned them by going to Alaska and that whatever happened next was entirely my fault. I held the phone a few inches from my ear and waited. When she finally ran out of words, I hung up. Agnes had been busy spreading her own version at her church, telling people that I had run off to join some kind of remote wilderness group and had come home confused and looking for someone to blame for my own choices. Several people from our old neighborhood called me with careful voices and concerned questions. I answered each one politely and briefly and told them nothing that wasn't completely true. Then I called the hospital where I had worked for 11 years before the layoff. They needed per diem nursing staff on 2 floors and sounded almost relieved when I asked about availability. "We'll take you as many days as you can give us," the charge nurse said. That first shift back, familiar hallways, the weight of the badge on my chest, the clear and honest purpose of a task that simply needed doing, felt like climbing out of something cold and dark. I slept without nightmares for the first time in weeks. The work had always been mine, and no one had been able to take that. Walter came to the motel on a Wednesday evening with a bunch of yellow carnations in plastic wrap that he held in both hands like they were a piece of evidence he was trying to present correctly. He sat in the chair by the window and talked for a long time. He said Agnes had been working on him for months before the claim was filed, saying the Alaska floods had been severe, that I hadn't checked in often enough, that I was probably gone, and the family needed to be practical about it. He said she had made filing the paperwork sound like the responsible, adult thing to do. He said he hadn't understood what he was signing. I listened. I didn't make it easy for him with nods or soft sounds of agreement. I let him talk until he stopped. Then he dropped the real news. Our son Carter, he told me, had used his share of the insurance payout, close to $18,000, to pay off gambling debts he had been hiding for 2 years. The kitchen remodel that Willa kept mentioning, the new appliances, all of it had been funded with what remained. My stomach went hollow. Carter was 31 years old, with a good job and a problem he had never once mentioned to me. After Walter left, I sat with that for a while. Then my phone buzzed, a photo message from Willa. She was holding up her hand in front of a bathroom mirror, showing off the ring on her finger. I recognized it immediately. It was my wedding ring, the one with the small sapphire chip that Walter and I had chosen together at a pawn shop when we were young and broke and counting every dollar and laughing about it anyway. The text underneath the photo said, "Finders keepers." I set the phone face down on the bed. I breathed through my nose for a long time. I picked up my notebook and wrote it all down before I let myself feel any of it. I had nearly forgotten about the safe deposit box. I had opened it years ago, specifically to keep documents somewhere no one in my household could access without my signature. I hadn't thought about it in so long that it took me 3 days to remember which branch it was at, and another day to find the key tucked into the lining of my old travel wallet at the bottom of my backpack. The box held my original insurance policy, my nursing licenses, some old bonds, and a sealed envelope containing my handwritten will. I spread everything out on the small table in the bank's privacy room and read through the policy carefully, page by page. And there it was, a beneficiary amendment form dated 2 years ago. The original beneficiary, Walter, had been replaced with something I had never heard of, the Hartwell Family Trust. I had never signed a beneficiary amendment form. But my signature was at the bottom of the page, or something designed to look like it. I photographed every page and drove directly to Mr. Harlan's office. He read through the documents slowly, turning each page with one careful finger. When he reached the amendment form, he held it up toward the window and studied it in the light without speaking. Then he set it down. The Hartwell Family Trust, he said, is controlled entirely by Donna. She registered it roughly 26 months ago. He looked at me steadily across his desk. This wasn't a sudden decision made under pressure. This was planned a long time in advance. The word premeditated didn't need to be said out loud. It simply occupied the room with us like a third person who hadn't been introduced. That evening I drove past my old house. Donna's new silver SUV, bought within weeks of the payout, sat in what used to be my driveway. I looked at it for a moment through the car window. Then I drove on. The anger felt clean this time. Not wild and scattered, but focused. The kind you can actually use. The insurance company moved faster than I had expected. Within 2 weeks of Mr. Harlan's formal notification, their legal team had reviewed the file and sent an official demand letter to Donna, requiring full repayment of the fraudulent claim plus statutory interest. It was a significant number, and the letter gave her 30 days. Mr. Harlan called me on a Tuesday morning to share the news. He kept his tone professional, but I could hear something underneath it. A quiet, contained satisfaction. They don't enjoy being defrauded, he said simply. And they have their own lawyers and their own resources. I heard about Donna's reaction secondhand through Walter, who got it from a neighbor. She had read the letter at her kitchen table, gone completely still, and not spoken for over 20 minutes. Then she had called her attorney, who had apparently been less encouraging than she had hoped. That night, at midnight, someone knocked at my motel room door. I looked through the peephole. Donna was standing in the hallway in a coat that was too thin for the temperature, mascara smeared, eyes red and swollen. She looked nothing like the woman who had been laughing over wine and stacks of cash at my kitchen table. She looked frightened in a way that had stripped away all the smooth confidence she usually carried everywhere. I opened the door, but did not step back to let her in. "Please," she said. "Naomi, please. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave permission. Tell them anything." Her voice broke at the edges. "We're sisters. I'm your blood. That has to mean something." I looked at her for a long time. I thought about her voice on the phone saying Naomi's gone for good. I thought about the Christmas card. I thought about my wedding ring on Willa's hand. "Go home, Donna," I said. "I don't have a home if this goes through," she whispered. I said nothing. I closed the door gently. I stood on the other side of it and listened to her cry quietly in the hallway. Then I heard her footsteps going away. And for the first time since I had come home, the power in this situation did not belong to her. I had been carefully avoiding Agnes, because every conversation with Agnes was designed to function as a trap. She didn't argue the way most people did. She moved slowly and surgically, saying things that sounded perfectly reasonable until you were already deep inside them and couldn't find your way back out. She had been doing this to me since the year Walter and I got married, and I had spent decades walking carefully around it. I saw her first near the bread aisle in the grocery store on a Thursday afternoon. I had enough time to go the other direction. I considered it. Then I thought about the Christmas card, the affidavit, the insurance money, and I stayed where I was. She came down the aisle with her cart angled like a small barricade and a tight, controlled smile. "Naomi," she said, I've been hoping to speak with you. Then speak, I said. She lowered her voice even though nobody was near us. You should be deeply ashamed of what you're doing to this family. Going to lawyers, dragging our names through official proceedings. Is that really who you are? She shook her head slowly. You always thought you were better than the rest of us, out there playing the hero while we stayed home and held everything together. She kept going. She said I had abandoned Walter. She said my nursing work in Alaska was a way of running from my responsibilities as a wife and mother. She said that whatever Donna had done, she had acted out of desperation caused by my own selfish choices, and that I needed to look honestly at my part in all of this. I let her talk. My right hand, inside my coat pocket, was recording every word on my phone. When she finally ran out of things to say, I said, "Thank you, Agnes," and walked to the next aisle. That evening, I sent the recording to Mr. Harlan with a short note explaining the date and location. His reply came within the hour. Evidence of malice. Excellent work. Get some rest tonight. I slept well. The notebook was getting thicker, and every page of it was working for me. Carter had been on a so-called business trip for 3 weeks, which Walter admitted was less of a trip and more of a disappearance. My son had always been better at avoiding things than at facing them. When something went wrong in his life, he found somewhere else to be until the sharpest edges wore down, and then he came home with a sheepish smile and waited for the people who loved him to let it go. It had worked his whole life, including with me. He called me on a Sunday and asked if we could meet somewhere quiet. I told him the coffee shop, 2 blocks from the hospital, 11 in the morning. He looked thin. Not sick thin, but the way a person looks when they haven't been sleeping well because something they've been carrying has gotten too heavy to ignore any longer. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and stared at the table surface before speaking. He told me he had known the insurance claim was being filed. He hadn't known every detail of how Donna had arranged it, but he had known a plan existed, and he had gone along with it because Donna had offered him money to stay quiet and not ask questions. $18,000, enough to clear the gambling debts he had been hiding from Walter and me for 2 years. She told me you weren't coming back, he said. She said the floods were bad and the odds were against you, and that the family needed to be practical. She had a text from me 2 days before the worst storm, I said. She knew I was alive when she filed those papers. He closed his eyes. I know that now. I let the silence stay between us for a moment. Then I asked the only question that actually mattered. Do you want to fix what you helped break? He nodded. He didn't add conditions or explanations or try to make it easier for himself. Just a single nod and 2 tired eyes that carried the full weight of what he'd done. Call Mr. Harlan tomorrow, I said. Tell him exactly what you told me just now. He called that same afternoon. Mr. Harlan filed for a temporary asset freeze 2 days after Carter's testimony was formally added to the record. The motion went before a judge on Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, the order was in place. I learned what that meant practically when Walter called to say that Donna's silver SUV had been towed from her driveway by a repossession company. She had purchased it largely on credit, using the insurance payout as proof of available funds. With the fraud now documented and the assets under court freeze, the lender hadn't waited around. I won't pretend I felt nothing hearing that. I did feel something, but it wasn't the sharp, hot satisfaction I might have expected a few weeks earlier. It was quieter than that. More like watching a row of dominoes fall that had been set up a long time ago by someone else's hand. A natural result of a chain that my sister had started. Donna called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. She left 2 voicemails. The first was angry, full of accusations about how I was tearing everything apart out of spite and how she had done everything for this family. The second was different, quieter, a little lost, like someone who had finally begun to understand that the ground was actually moving under them. Agnes, according to Walter, had gone to see her own lawyer and come home from the meeting pale and unusually silent. He didn't know what had been said exactly, but something about it had shaken her in a way that Walter said he hadn't seen before. The freeze also applied to any remaining funds Carter or Willa held that could be traced back to the original payout. Willa called me that evening, angrier than I had hurt her. She told me I was destroying the family. I told her the family had been destroyed by fraud, and that I was simply the person making sure there were actual consequences for it. She hung up. I sat at the small motel desk, opened my notebook, and wrote down every call. My first real paycheck from the hospital arrived on a Friday afternoon and felt like the most honest thing I had held in months. I had earned it with 12-hour shifts and night rounds and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that still felt better, by miles, than sitting in that motel room wondering what Donna was planning next. I found a small furnished apartment on a side street near the hospital. It had one bedroom, a kitchen that was barely bigger than a closet, and a window that looked out onto a maple tree, just beginning to show the first green buds of spring. The landlord asked for first and last month's rent and a deposit. I paid it with my own money I had earned with my own work, and signed my name on the lease without anyone else's signature required. Moving in took less than an hour. I had almost nothing. The box of clothes Willa had brought to the motel, my backpack from Alaska, a few things I had picked up at the discount store. I had left 32 years of belongings in a house that currently felt more like a crime scene than anything that had ever been my home. Walter came by that evening. He stood in the doorway holding a bag of groceries, ground coffee, a loaf of bread, a container of soup, as if he had thought carefully about what a person actually needs when starting over from nearly nothing. He looked at the bare kitchen counter and the single chair at the small table. "Can I stay?" he said. He wasn't asking for forgiveness or a full restoration of anything, just to be let in. "I won't ask for more than that, just for now." I thought about it honestly. I thought about how long he had been letting other people make decisions and calling it loyalty. I thought about him waiting in the parking lot of the motel, shamefaced, holding nothing back when he told me what had been done. "The couch is yours," I said, "but you stay on it until you show me clearly where you actually stand." He put the groceries away without another word. That night I heard him crying quietly in the dark, and I let him have that. Willa arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday evening without calling ahead. I almost didn't open the door, but there was something about the way she knocked, 3 short, uncertain taps, that made me look through the peephole instead of walking away. She was standing in the hallway alone, no coat despite the cold, hugging herself with both arms around her middle. I opened the door. She looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something heavy for too long and knowing, finally, that you can't keep carrying it. She came inside without being invited and stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the floor. "I didn't know she was going to do all of it," she said. "When Donna first talked to me, she made it sound like it would just be a piece of paperwork. She said you'd probably never come back from the floods anyway, that we were just being prepared." I didn't say anything. I let her keep going. "The notary was someone she already had a connection to," Willa continued. "She had the affidavit drawn up before she ever asked me to be a witness. I didn't read it closely enough. I told myself it was just a formality." She pressed her lips together. I knew what it was. I told myself I didn't. She opened her bag and pulled out a folded set of papers. I recognized them immediately as originals, not copies, the paper quality, the ink, the official stamp. She held them out to me with both hands, the way you offer something you've been carrying for too long and have finally decided to put down. It was the notarized affidavit declaring my death. Donna's signature at the top. Willa's underneath as a witness, the notary's stamp at the bottom. "She told me you'd never find out," Willa said. "That by the time anything came to light, it would be too late." I took the documents from her hands. I looked at them for a moment, then looked at her. I pulled her into a brief, firm hug. Not because I had forgiven her, I hadn't decided anything about that yet, but because I needed what she was handing over, and she needed to feel that the act of handing it over meant something. "Call Mr. Harlan tomorrow morning," I said. The discovery hearings began on a gray Tuesday morning in March. Mr. Harlan had spent 2 evenings the week before walking me carefully through the process, what to expect, what questions would come, how to answer them. "Say only what is true," he told me. Only what you know for absolute certain. Don't guess and don't add to your answers unless I specifically ask you to. I wore my nurse's scrubs to court. It was a deliberate decision. I wanted the judge to see exactly who I was. A working woman, a healthcare professional, someone who had traveled to a remote village to do a difficult job because it needed doing. Not someone destabilized by bitterness or confusion, the way Donna's version of events required me to be. Donna's lawyer had a smooth, unhurried quality. He was skilled at making things sound as though they could be read more than one way. He suggested that my communication pattern from Alaska had been inconsistent. He implied that my absence had caused the family genuine and reasonable concern. He used the phrase, well-meaning but misguided, several times in his opening. Mr. Harlan let him finish without interruption. Then he began laying out the timeline, dated text, messages, the Christmas card with its postmark, bank records showing when and exactly where the insurance money had been spent, Carter's testimony, Willa's affidavit, the recorded confrontation in the grocery store, the beneficiary amendment bearing what appeared to be a forged version of my signature. Each piece appeared on the screen at the front of the room, simple and clear and documented. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, leaned forward with each new item and asked questions that were direct and slightly impatient in a way that told me she was forming opinions she wasn't ready to state yet. I sat with my hand still in my lap and didn't look at Donna. But once I glanced over and caught her expression, a closed, tight blankness that meant she understood exactly how this was going. When we broke for lunch, Mr. Gresh, Harlan said simply, "You're doing well." It was enough. Agnes took the stand on the second day of hearings. She had dressed carefully, a dark blazer, neat hair, small gold earrings. She sat upright with her hands folded and spoke in the measured, warm voice she used when she wanted to sound like the most reasonable person in any room. She had been perfecting that voice for decades. She said she had been deeply worried about me during my time in Alaska. She said the floods had been severe and that my communications had become infrequent and then stopped altogether. She said that after multiple attempts to reach me went unanswered, the family had reluctantly concluded I had most likely not survived. She said it had been an agonizing decision and that they had all grieved deeply and genuinely. She was smooth, polished. I had to give her that much. Mr. Harlan cross-examined her for 40 minutes. He showed the court the full phone records documenting every call I had made from Alaska, including 4 calls to Walter's cell phone in the 6 weeks before the claim was filed. He showed her the text message I had sent to Donna. He presented the Christmas card and asked her, clearly and without decoration, to explain how Donna had known to send a holiday card to a woman the entire family believed to be dead. Agnes's answers became shorter and less steady as the morning went on. Carter followed her to the witness stand. He had cut his hair since our meeting at the coffee shop, and he sat up straight the way I had taught him when he was 12 years old and learning how to handle himself in difficult rooms. He answered every question plainly and without hesitation. He confirmed that Donna had told him I was alive and working in Alaska when the claim was filed. He confirmed the payment she had made to secure his silence. He confirmed that the family's version of events had been a cover story built on a foundation everyone involved knew was false. The courtroom went very still when he said it. Donna showed no visible reaction, but her lawyer leaned over and whispered something to her, and she pressed her lips together until they went completely white. The news came through Mr. Harlan on a Wednesday morning, delivered in his usual steady, unhurried way over a cup of coffee in his small office above the dry cleaning shop. The insurance company's legal department has formally joined the civil action, he said. They're naming Donna and Agnes as co-defendants in the fraud case. I turned my coffee cup slowly in my hands. What does that mean practically? It means, he said, that you are no longer the only party with a legal team and a reason to see this through to a complete resolution. They have significantly deeper resources than you, and they have considerably less patience for individuals who file fraudulent claims against them. He paused. It also means that Donna's attorney is going to have a considerably harder week than usual. I had been wondering how long it would take the insurance company to decide the case was worth their full attention. Fraudulent payouts were one thing when they were small or difficult to document. This one was neither. The paper trail was solid, the timeline was clear, and the company had paid out a significant sum it now had every legal right to pursue. Agnes, according to Walter, had gotten the news before I did. She had stopped attending her church meetings, and the social group where she had been quietly painting me as unstable and difficult was now aware that she was a named defendant in an insurance fraud case. Her carefully cultivated standing in that circle had developed some very visible cracks very quickly. The scrutiny on Donna's spending intensified. The vacation she had taken 6 weeks after the payout, the new furniture she had finally been able to afford, the repairs to her house that had sat undone for years. Every dollar was being mapped against dates and amounts from the payout. Every dollar spent was a dollar that would need to come back. The walls were closing in now from more than one direction, and I was no longer standing in front of all of them alone. The detail that changed everything came from a direction none of us had anticipated or planned for. Mr. Harlan called on a Friday afternoon, and I could tell from the very first word that something significant had shifted. He asked me to come to his office, and I drove there directly from my shift, still in my scrubs, hair tucked under a clip. He was standing when I arrived. That was unusual. He was a man who had made peace with sitting down a long time ago. He had a printed document in his hand. The notary who stamped the death affidavit, he said, is currently under investigation by the state licensing board for fraud in 2 other cases. Separate clients have come forward claiming he backdated and falsified documents for them in exchange for cash payments made off the books. I sat down. When subpoenaed, Mr. Harlan continued, settling into his own chair now, he produced his records. Those records included a handwritten personal log, his own notes, which showed he had actually stamped your death affidavit on a date 3 weeks earlier than the date printed on the document itself. He placed the printout on the desk between us. There was also a payment notation. He received double his standard fee for this job. The extra amount was paid in cash, separate from the formal invoice. The meaning was plain and simple. Donna had paid him extra to backdate the paperwork so the timeline would match her version of events. This eliminates any remaining argument that the filing was made in good faith, Mr. Harlan said. This is documented, deliberate, premeditated fraud. The judge issued an order that same week requiring a full accounting of every single dollar that had passed through the Hartwell Family Trust since its creation. Every purchase, every transfer, every withdrawal, every transaction. I drove home through the evening traffic with my hands steady on the wheel, thinking about all the small, careful steps that had led to this moment. For the first time since I had come home, I felt completely certain about how it would end. The last of Walter's things came into my apartment on a Saturday morning, carried in 2 careful trips from the trunk of his car. A box of clothes and books, his shaving kit, the small framed photograph of the 2 of us from the year we got married, young and unpolished and looking straight into the camera like we had no idea yet what was coming, which was true. He set the box on the kitchen table. Underneath it was a plain manila folder. Bank statements, he said, from a joint account Agnes set up when she convinced me to be part of the trust arrangement. She told me it was for tax purposes. I didn't understand what was going in and out of it. He paused, looking at the folder. I kept copies of everything, all the way through. Agnes didn't know I did. He slid the folder toward me. Inside were 12 months of detailed records. They showed the movement of the insurance payout through 3 separate accounts before it reached Donna's hands. They showed payments made to Carter. A cash withdrawal Agnes had taken for herself. The notary's payment, listed under a category labeled simply administrative fees. Everything Mr. Harlan had been trying to document through formal subpoenas was here, laid out on paper in clean rows, with dates and account numbers attached to every single entry. I should have brought this to you the first week you came back, Walter said. The first day. I should have chosen you immediately. And I didn't. He looked at me, the way a person looks when they are not quite asking to be forgiven, but when they need the other person to understand that the regret is genuine and has been eating at them. I took the folder. I looked at the records. I thought about what they meant for the case, for the timeline, for every gap in the record that Mr. Harlan had been working to close. Then I set the folder down on the table, crossed the kitchen, and held my husband for the first time in 8 months. I cried, the good kind, the kind that means something heavy is finally draining away. The day before the judge was scheduled to deliver her ruling, Donna's lawyer filed an emergency motion. Mr. Harlan called me at 7 in the morning, before I left for my shift, and I could hear the careful control in his voice, the way he sounds when something has changed and he is deciding how to frame it. They have produced a new witness, he said. Someone claiming to have had a personal conversation with you in Alaska in which you stated clearly and explicitly that you did not intend to return home. My stomach dropped in a single, sudden movement, like stepping onto a stair that wasn't there. Who? I asked. He told me. The name was Fern Holt. I had to think for a moment before it connected to anything. Fern Holt was one of Agnes's Thursday card group friends, a sharp-tongued, watchful woman who had always positioned herself on Agnes's side of every argument, who had once told me at a family dinner that nurses were just glorified assistants, and seemed genuinely surprised when I didn't take offense. The hearing has been continued to allow cross-examination, Mr. Harlan said. The judge is not pleased at the timing, but the process must be followed. I went to work. I completed the full 12-hour shift with my brain running in 2 places simultaneously, one part steady and focused on my patients, the other turning over every angle of what this meant. Could Fern Holt have actually been in Alaska? I had never crossed paths with her outside of Agnes's house. The claim was not just unlikely, it was impossible. But impossible and inadmissible were not the same thing, and the delay meant more time, more waiting, more uncertainty. Everything I had spent 10 months building now rested on a motion filed the night before the finish line. I got home late and sat in the kitchen in the dark. Walter was already asleep on the couch. I opened my notebook and wrote down every encounter I could remember having with Fern Holt, with dates wherever I could attach them. Fern Holt arrived at the rescheduled hearing dressed as if she were attending a pleasant luncheon. She sat in the witness chair with her ankles neatly crossed and spoke in a clear, composed voice about how she had visited relatives in Alaska during the relevant period and had encountered me entirely by chance in the village where I was working. She claimed we had talked for close to an hour. She claimed I had been direct and specific about having no intention of returning home. Mr. Harlan let her finish. He thanked her politely. Then he began. He asked her to name the relatives she had been visiting, their location, and the dates of her stay. Her answers were vague in a way that became increasingly uncomfortable to watch as each one failed to connect to the next. He asked her to describe the village in specific detail. The layout, the clinic building, the road in from the main route. Each answer slowed down and lost specificity. Then, he produced a certified letter from the coordinator of the Alaska Relief Program confirming that no outside visitors had been registered at the village site during the entire window. Fern Holt claimed to have been there. The area had been under restricted access due to ongoing flood damage assessment. He produced one final document, a text message exchange between Agnes and Fern Holt, dated just 2 weeks before the hearing, in which Agnes discussed the financial arrangement that would follow if Fern's testimony was persuasive enough to change the judge's decision in Donna's favor. The judge removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Fern Holt. The question she asked was short and came out flat and cold as a stone. Fern Holt looked at her own hands. Then she said she had never actually been to Alaska. The courtroom went silent, the way rooms go silent when something irreversible has just happened. Donna's lawyer sat completely still. Donna looked at the table in front of her with a face emptied of all expression. I watched from my seat with my hands folded calmly in my lap and felt something I had been carrying for 10 months release slowly from the center of my chest. Tired satisfaction. That was the name for it. The full accounting was delivered to the court 3 days after the hearing, compiled from Walter's bank statements, the notary's records, the insurance company's own transaction logs, Carter's testimony, and Willa's original affidavit. It was thorough and it was complete, and it left nothing unexplained. Every dollar was accounted for on the page. The silver SUV, the truck Carter had bought, Willa's kitchen remodel, Agnes's personal cash withdrawal, the notary's additional payment, the vacation, the new furniture, the repairs, the small, everyday purchases that had been made with money that had never belonged to any of them. Everything traced, dated, and attributed to a specific person and transaction. The total, with statutory interest and legal fees, was a number that made Donna's lawyer sit very still when the judge read it aloud. The judge's findings were methodical and thorough, in a way that left no room for reinterpretation. She described the fraud as deliberate and premeditated, carried out across a period of at least 2 years. She noted the beneficiary amendment, the backdated affidavit, the paid notary, and the false witness produced at the final stage. She noted that I had maintained consistent and documented contact with family members throughout my entire time in Alaska, and that the death claim had been filed with complete knowledge that I was alive. She ordered Donna and Agnes jointly liable for full repayment plus interest. She referred the matter to the county prosecutor's office for consideration of criminal charges. She noted Fern Holt's testimony in the record and forwarded that section of the proceedings as well. Donna sat through all of it with her hands flat on the table and her eyes fixed somewhere in the middle distance, like a person trying very hard to hold themselves together and not quite managing. Carter and Willa signed over assets without being asked. Carter looked ill. Willa looked like someone who had finally stopped running and was not sure what to do with the stillness. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Harlan shook my hand. His eyes were warm. She came to my apartment on a Saturday morning about a week after the ruling. I saw her first from the kitchen window. Donna, sitting on the bottom step of the building entrance with her coat pulled tight, an old paper coffee cup in her hands that had clearly gone cold a long time ago. Her hair was loose and uncombed. The silver SUV was long gone. Agnes had lost the house. The foreclosure had moved quickly once the asset freeze was fully in place, and the life Donna had built with money that was never hers had come apart around her in a matter of weeks. I watched her through the window for a few minutes before going downstairs. She looked up when she heard the door open. She didn't try to stand. She just looked at me from the step with an expression that had no armor left in it at all, no calculation behind it, no angles being quietly worked, just exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse, though I had learned a long time ago to be careful about reading Donna's emotions too quickly. "I'm losing everything," she said. "The house is gone. The car is gone. Agnes blames me for everything that happened to her and won't return my calls." She looked at her hands. "I have nowhere to go." I sat down on the step beside her, not to comfort her, just because I didn't want to look down at her while we talked. "You buried me, Donna," I said. "Legally, on paper, in front of officials. You signed my name to a death, knowing I was alive." She pressed her lips together. She didn't deny it. "I know what I did," she said quietly. "Tell me why," I said. She thought about it for a long time. "The street was quiet. A car went past slowly. Because I was tired of watching you be the good one," she said at last. "And because I genuinely believed you weren't coming back." I sat with that for a moment. Then I stood up. "I hope the prosecutor is as honest with you as you just were with me," I said. I went back inside and closed the door gently behind me. Agnes made her move through lawyers. Her attorney sent Mr. Harlan a formal settlement proposal on a Monday, a carefully constructed offer in which Agnes proposed to repay 10% of her share of the fraudulent payout in exchange for removal from the civil suit and written non-cooperation from my side in the ongoing criminal referral. Mr. Harlan called me to read it aloud, and when he finished, there was a pause in which I could hear him exhale very quietly through his nose. For him, that was practically a laugh. 10 cents on the dollar, I said. Slightly less than that, actually, once you account for the adjustments she's proposing to the baseline calculation. A brief pause. My professional recommendation is to decline. Decline it, I said. I wasn't angry about the offer. It was exactly the kind of move Agnes would make, structured to appear reasonable, designed to minimize her exposure, priced at just enough to look like a real concession without actually being one. She had been managing situations this way her entire life, and it had always worked because the people around her could be worn down by persistence and the weight of keeping the peace. What she hadn't adjusted for was that she was no longer dealing with a family member. She was dealing with a legal proceeding that had its own momentum now, and it didn't get tired. Walter and I went out to dinner that evening, just the two of us, a real sit-down dinner at a small Italian place near the hospital. We talked for over 2 hours about things that had nothing at all to do with hearings or affidavits. We talked about the village in Alaska. We talked about his sister's new grandchild. We talked about whether we wanted to grow tomatoes and planters on the apartment balcony come summer. When we got home, there was a small bunch of yellow tulips on the kitchen table. Walter had bought them while I was at work and left them there without mentioning it. I put them in a glass of water and set them on the windowsill next to the maple tree, which was almost fully in bloom. The judge had set the final ruling for Friday. I already knew how it would go. Walter and I drove past the old house the evening before the final hearing. We hadn't planned it exactly. We were coming back from the grocery store, and I took a different route than usual, one that passed down the familiar street where I had lived for 18 years, raised 2 children, and cooked more meals than I could count or would ever bother trying to. The for sale sign was already planted near the front rosebush, the one I had put in the ground myself a full decade ago, which was blooming now without anyone paying attention to it. The lawn had grown a little past where it should have been cut. One of the upstairs window shades was half drawn and tilted slightly, the way things look when no one is home to straighten them. Agnes was standing on the front porch with a single suitcase at her feet. Wearing the coat with the oversized buttons I had always privately thought made her look like a figure from a children's picture book. She looked small in a way that had nothing to do with her height. She wasn't looking in our direction. Walter slowed the car slightly without stopping. I watched her from the passenger window. This woman who had told me I was selfish for going to help a flood-damaged village, who had spread stories at her church, who had lied under oath and paid another woman to lie alongside her. I did not feel rage. I had expected something sharp and hot, the way I had felt the first night I drove past and saw Donna's SUV sitting in my driveway. But what came instead was something quieter and cleaner. A kind of emptiness that felt like a room that has been fully cleared out and aired through after a long time of being shut up. Walter reached over and put his hand over mine without taking his eyes off the road. Tomorrow, the judge would make it official. The full ruling, the criminal referral, the final repayment order, all of it documented, recorded, and permanent. But I already knew how this story ended. I had known since the morning I walked out of Mr. Harlan's office with the first real spark of fight back in my chest and my evidence in my hands. I was alive. I had proved it in every room that mattered. And not one of them would ever get to bury me again. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to protect you, or if you know what it feels like to have your voice taken away by someone who smiled while they did it, then you already know why Brooke's story matters. This is the kind of story we tell here. Real stakes, real consequences, real people who refuse to fold. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one, because the stories coming are even more powerful than this one. And you don't want to be the last person to hear them. And before you go, drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? And what part of Brooke's story hit you the hardest? Share this with someone who needs to hear that staying quiet can be the most powerful move you make, and that the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. We'll see you in the next one.